Good afternoon. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the Product Manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And welcome to our weekly session where we talk about CI Tools. Last week we talked about the roof covering tool and we looked at how you can control all the parts of the roof covering and a couple of things to sort of look out for that you can do around ridges and that sort of thing. This week we're going to be doing the same, but for the wall coverings. So we'll have a look at all of the different things we can do with wall coverings and a couple of things to watch out for in certain situations as well. Before we get started though, if you have any questions during the course of this webinar, please just enter those in the chat panel and I will try to get to those during the course of the webinar, or if I don't see them until after we finish up, or I don't have time to answer them, I can get back to you via a support ticket. If you do have questions that you think of after the fact, or if you just have any suggestions for future webinar topics or anything like that, you can also email those through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com. That will come through as a support ticket, and either our support team will help you out or they'll forward you on to me and I'll help you out. But either way, we should be able to help or record the suggestion that you've had so that we can do that for a future webinar topic. As I say, we're going to be looking at the wall coverings today. We are going to be working in ArchiCAD 28. So all of what we're going to be looking at is available in ArchiCAD 28. Most of it is also available in previous versions as well. So if you are using an older version, I think almost all of what we're going to be looking at today will also be available in 27 and 26. Once you get to 25, it will be a little rougher, but still most of what you're seeing today will apply to those versions as well. Yeah, but 28 will have all of the functionality that we're going to be looking at today. And finally, if you don't have the coverings tool already and you want to try it out, head to myci.centralinnovation.com/free trial, and you can sign up for as you might guess, a free trial there, and that will allow you to use the CI coverings tool with full functionality for 30 days, so that you can decide if you want to start a subscription for that tool after you've done that trial. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the coverings tool. So I'll start off by looking at the basics of how the tool works and what we can get done with it. And then once we've had a look at that, we will jump into the specifics of how each of the parts work, and then a couple of things to watch out for while you're using the tool. So obviously, as with roof coverings being applied to roofs, wall coverings apply to walls. So what they'll do is they'll put 3D cladding onto your walls so that you get a nice 3D representation of what your cladding is. And also because they are 3D elements, it means that if we cut through them in a sectional elevation, you'll be able to see the details of those. So we'll have a look at that once we get some claddings applied as well. So it just gives you a nice bit of extra detail to your 3D models, and it reduces some of the extra work of detailing that you have to do in your sections and elevations, because those are already done for you. And if you make changes to your claddings, you don't have to go through and update all of the detail work you've done. It's already there. So the first thing we need to do when we are placing wall coverings is to select the walls that we want to cover. So the way that the covering works is the same as with the roof, is that we select the wall, we say we want to apply a covering to it, and then it will essentially use the shape of the wall to create the covering for us. So it will create weatherboards or whatever. It'll cut a hole out for our window like we see here, and it will also adjust it to the angle of the roof that it is sitting up against. So it will do all of the things that you will expect. It will be a separate element sitting alongside the wall. It doesn't become part of the wall, but it will essentially attach itself to the wall. If we move the wall, the covering will move. If we move the window in the wall, the hole that's in the covering will move with that and that sort of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our walls. We need to go to floor plan view to do that. For wall coverings, roof coverings, you can add in 3D, but wall coverings, we need to know what side of the wall you want to place it on. And it's difficult to define that in 3D. So we need to select them in 2D first to be able to apply these wall coverings. So we'll jump to our floor plan view and we'll select some walls. You can do it with one wall or multiple walls. I'll select this wall here, which happens to be part of a group of 4. And then I'll go to my CI Tools menu, Coverings, and I'll choose the Wall Coverings option here. And this will bring up the browser to let me choose which wall coverings object to use. We will be using the CI Tools wall coverings object. You will also see that the deprecated object is in here. If you are placing new wall coverings, please just ignore this wall covering. It has been superseded by the new one. The reason the old one is still there is because the new version did make quite a few changes. So if you already had wall coverings placed using the old version, it makes sense to keep using that for a while. For those, we don't want to force you to have to migrate to using the new object if you're not ready to yet. So we're going to be using the wall covering, CI Tools wall covering. I'll just reset to the default settings there. And you can see what it looks like in 3D. We've got something that looks like some cladding on a wall, and I'm not gonna look at any settings at all. I'm just gonna hit OK and have it place those. So you'll see we now have a little eyeball icon here, and we've got some line work we can move around, and this is defining, as I said before, the side of the wall we want to place it on. So it's drawing out this outline of the walls here, and we can click either inside or outside to choose what side to place it on. So we'll click outside, and then it will go ahead and do that for us. So you can see now on my floor plan view, we have these sills attached and then this extra piece sitting alongside our walls all the way around. And if we jump back to 3D now, we will see those new wall coverings apply once it rebuilds in a second. All right, so you can see we have these weatherboards, as it happens in this case. That's the default setting. 3D weatherboards applied to our walls. You can see that they are 3-dimensional. We have shadows being cast. So we've got a shadow being cast by one of these beams across here, and you can see that it is doing what you would expect that to do. It's sort of jaggedy because it's covering each board. The board above casts a shadow on the board below, and so on. We've also got some sills being applied as well. This is part of the covering, so it's placing sills underneath my openings, my windows and doors. And you can also see that in the corner, it is mitering this wall covering to this one. It's the same as the walls are mitered underneath it. So it does pretty much what you would expect something to do based on how I've described it so far. And if we jump to our section view, we'll also see it showing up there as well. So looking at our walls, this is our wall cladding here. So it's placed this 3D weatherboard here, which we're cutting through, so we can see the representation of that. And as I say, just means we don't have to do a bunch of detailed drawing to get those weatherboards to show. Obviously, these ones here you can see are being cut, and these ones here are not, because we're cutting through this window at the moment. So you can see the different coloring there based on the cut and not cut. And you can also see the sill that it placed on this opening as well, showing up below here. So that is a wall cladding placed on our wall. Now let's have a look through the various settings that are available to see the kinds of things that we can do with this. So once 3D wakes up again, we'll select this wall covering here and go into the settings and see what we can see. So I'll start from the top on the configuration tab here. And we can see a couple of settings here. So on the left-hand side, we've just got some information about how to place this, so that if you stumble across the object by itself, you can sort of get an idea of how it should actually be placed. And then we've got a ignore wall geometry near ends option down the bottom here. Ignore that for now, but we will have a look at this later on. But what we're most concerned with at the moment is the part on the right here. So the first piece here is to choose how we want to split our cladding. So we have options here for the below opening, above opening, sill height, and head height. And what we can do is we can press any of these buttons in for any splits that we want. So if we want it split below the openings, and above the head height we can click those two, and that changes this to show that we have different coverings on those different parts. So we can have different pieces going on. One of the more common ones you probably would want to come across, would want to use, would be having it split at the sill height. We're defining the sill height here directly below it, so we set the sill height to 900 in this case, and if you're using head height, the value for that is there, and that will just split it into two so that we can have it in two pieces now. So we could have brick on the bottom and then weatherboard on top, for instance, which is what we'll do today. So I'll split that there at 900. Then we've got our options for how the shape of the covering works. So we are setting the top and the base at the moment to follow the wall, but we can override that to do something different if we need to as well. So we can click on follow wall, and we can choose to have flat. So this means it won't follow the top shape of the wall. It will just always be completely horizontal at the top. And if we choose that option, we can define the height of the covering. Follow wall will follow the shape of the wall. It can be offset down if you want it to as well, so it comes away from the edge, say to allow for a roof if you're on the inside of the wall or something like that. And then we have follow wall up to maximum height, which does exactly what it sounds like. It'll do the same as follow wall, but then it will also truncate at a certain height. And custom shape will allow us to define the shape that we want using a series of nodes on the wall covering, so that you can completely customize how the top shape should look. I'm going to go back to follow wall though, and that's probably what you'll want to use in most cases. The base works in a similar way. So we've got follow wall and we have an offset up this time. So we're offsetting up from the base. If you want to do the opposite of these, by the way, so offset down, if you enter a negative value in offset down, it will offset upwards. And if you enter a negative value into offset up, it will offset downwards. So it will overhang off the bottom of the wall. So if you do need to do any of those, just enter negative values to do the opposite of what they're saying. That will work. So we've got follow wall, same as before. We have custom shape, the same as for the top shape, and we have flat available as well. And obviously it doesn't really make sense to have follow wall to a certain height in this case, because we are starting at the bottom. And then we've got a pen for our pen weight here, which I will leave as it is. Moving on from configuration, you'll see that we have a sub-menu for each of the splits that we specified. So we've got main wall cladding and main cladding below sill height. If I add more splits, you will see more menu items here. So we'll get one for each thing. And essentially what this is it's just a different cladding setting for each of those split sections. So I'll go back to just what we had there. And then we can go to main wall cladding, and that will show us the settings for the main piece. So that is the part at the top here. And you can see that we are using weatherboards, which is what we saw when we looked at it in 3D. We can go through here and we can modify those weatherboards. So we could make the boards, we could make the entire cladding set out further away from the wall. We could modify the B value, which is the thickness of the boards, the C, which is the width of the boards, the D, which is the end-to-end width of the boards, so without the overhang. And we can also set the angle. So if we set this to say 90 degrees, the weatherboards will be running up and straight up and down across the wall instead of side to side, as it were, horizontally or vertically. Or you could put a different angle on there if you want to. I hope you don't, but if you do need to, the option is there. But generally, you'll probably just be switching between 0 degrees and 90 degrees to get them horizontal or vertical. But we have other options available besides just weatherboards. So you can see all of the options available here. We've got generic, which is just a flat piece on the wall. We've got bricks, boards and battens, which will do exactly what it sounds like. It will add boards and then battens, and you can choose the spacing between the battens, the size of the battens, and that sort of thing. Bricks and blocks will draw on block work and model each individual block and the mortar piece between them. You can choose the different bond types here as well on those blocks. Corrugated metal will do exactly what it sounds like, corrugated metal, same as what we saw on the roof last week. Logs will give you logs on your walls if you're designing a log cabin or something. Panels will allow you to define the shape and offset of panels, and then it will just essentially wallpaper along using the panels, so you can adjust the size of the panels, the thickness of the panels, size of the gap, and that sort of thing. Ribbed metal works similarly to corrugate, and also similarly to the ribbed option on the wall, on the roof tool, so you can adjust the bottom and top height of the ribs and the spacing between them. Shiplap grooved and shiplap smooth. We'll just add a nice shiplap option to your walls. You can also choose how the offset and the size of those works, so they can all be the same size or they can be different, so you can have random widths or a repeating section. Shakes and shingles, well, we'll do shingles on your walls, and again you can choose the size of those and the rotation and that sort of thing. Vinyl weatherboards, we'll do vinyl weatherboards, and standard weatherboards will do wooden ones, which is what we saw before. So we're going to stick with weatherboards in this case. So I'll leave these settings as is, although we might just adjust the size of these so that you can see that change. So I'll make them a bit bigger. And this can be 125. And then down at the bottom here, we have a setting 0 above bottom left. So this is the offset of the wall cladding. So we're choosing where we are offsetting it from, and then how far above, in this case, we want to go. There's a couple of options we can choose for where they are on the wall. So the top or bottom, left or right, the center of the wall, or a specific story level can be chosen as options here. And then we can choose where that goes above those, so that if you're finding that they are stopping at the wrong point on your wall, you can shift that upwards using this control here. And then over on the right, we've got the controls for the building material at the top here. So at the moment, we've got plywood selected. We can go in here and we can say, actually, this should be timber wall, let's say. And then we can override the pen, not the pen, the surface that's being used on those as well. So we can click this button here. It's a kind of a paintbrush button, and we can choose what paint color we want to actually use on these. So we can swap that out for a nice pale blue there. There's also a second option next to the paintbrush, which is sort of a sun icon, I guess. This is the same as it was in the roof covering. So we can click that, and what it will do is when that's turned on, it will only cover the visible area of the wall covering with this. So it won't cover the back side of the wall covering pieces. This is useful for if you're generating surfaces schedules. It means that you won't get double of everything because it's covering both sides. It'll only cover the side that's exposed, so it'll give you an accurate value for the exposed areas using that surface. So we can stick with that one. Then we've got some pen settings below. So with those changes being made, let's define the second split cladding. So we'll change to below sill height. You can see it defaulted to generic, which is why we've just got a white slab there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose bricks and blocks. And then I'm going to hit this plus button over here. And what this will do is, at the moment, the bricks and blocks are essentially just being drawn over top of a generic piece there. But what I want to do instead is I want to actually model the individual bricks and blocks. So I hit the plus button to turn on that sort of extra detailed mode. And now we can define the size of all of the components there. We can change our building material to be brick, which I think I have. Here we go, brick. And we can override the color because it's showing a texture which doesn't match what we want. Let's see if I can get something that looks a bit like a brick color without a texture on it. That's horrible. Let's just go with sand beige for now. So we can define those settings there, and then we can also define the mortar color. Let's do that gray paint, I think. I'll do light gray. So there we go. So we've set up our two cladding types. I can hit OK now, and it will apply those to my wall. So you can see we have our slightly larger weatherboards now, and we've got our brickwork down at the bottom underneath that 900 split there. So yeah, as you can see, it allows us to do quite a lot of different things there. One of the other things that we can do now that we've got our cladding set out is we can choose how we want to do additional pieces on our cladding. So for instance, our sill here, and also the change between these two walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update this other cladding to have the same settings. I just picked up the settings from this one and injected them over here. We'll select these two, and you'll see in my settings for the main wall and below sill height options, we've got a series of buttons after the actual cladding button here. So we can choose the external corner junction, internal corner junction, square ends, and cladding change. So essentially, these are all the different cladding change types. We've got corners, we've got the end, and we've got the change, which are both on the same plane. So we can come in here and we can say on external corners, we want to actually add some trim. Let's add a beveled trim to this one. We want it to have the building material of, let's go for timber wall again. And we'll override the color so that we can see it nice and easily. And we'll make that nice bright blue there so that we can see that being applied. And now if I click OK, you can see we have a piece of trim on that corner there running all the way down, but only on the weatherboard because we only set it for the main cladding. If you wanted to do the same on the bricks, we can do that. So we'll go down to the below sill height. We'll add a corner piece on there of coins, if that's how you pronounce that word. We'll change that one to be brick, and we will override the surface with sienna sand just so that we can see that again, and we'll hit OK, and it will do the same but on the lower half of our roof now so that you can see that nice corner change there as well. So that's a nice way of covering these, and obviously it'll do the same thing on internal corners or transitions between two in-plane walls and all of that sort of thing, depending on which one you use. They all work the same way. It's just which one you choose. So we can go internal corner. We get the same options, and we can do the same sorts of things. Obviously, you can't do coining changes on all ends and that sort of thing, but it should make sense. Moving down the list here, we then have some trims for the different parts of the wall. So we can say we want to trim on the top of the wall, the head height, the sill height, or the base. So at the moment, we've got a sill change between weatherboard and brick. So let's put a trim on that. So we can choose a rectangular profile trim here. 20 looks, I'm not quite sure what I set my bricks to, but let's set this to be 50 for now. And we will set it to be timber general is fine. And we'll give it a nice white there so that we can see that nice and easily. Click OK. And then you see we get a nice bit of a trim at the transition point between our two splits there. Obviously, you could apply this if you didn't have splits and you'll just see a piece sitting there. And then we could also do a head height trim. So we could come over, a wall top trim. So we could say rectangular profile again, and we'll make this one with that nice blue again so that we can match our vertical trim there. Oh, and it's being trimmed away by the roof, so I can't see that one at the moment, sorry. But that's what that one will do. And then last, we have the openings, and this is what you were seeing with those sills that you can see in my background there. So the sill here, and also the sills on the other side. Obviously, in a lot of cases, these will be part of your windows and doors themselves, but you can have the wall covering handle them instead. This is useful for if your windows and doors don't have the setting, or for if you're you just want to have exactly the same sill across all of them, and you don't want to have to go into each window and door and add sills and that sort of thing. So we can control the offset for them here. We can add a head trim here, jam trims here, and a sill trim here. You can see brick sill is what we have selected for the sill at the moment. We could switch that out to just a sill, standard solid sill here. We can make that a different color so that we can see that. And then it will go through and do what we specified there. So just added that nice little sill below each of my openings there. So it just makes it much easier to handle getting a lot of those done on your project. And as said, obviously it's useful for if you're using windows and doors that can't do sills as well. Now, the last thing I just wanted to show you before we finish up today is we saw that control earlier about ignoring the ends of the windows. And the reason for that one is because of this. So I'll just show you. I'm just going to grab my window here and I'm going to move it right into the close to the corner of my wall here. And what you'll see, oops, that was a little bit too close. What you'll see here is that once it gets close to the corner, it stops drawing the rest of the covering. You can see we would expect the covering to have a small piece running down here, but it's not doing that anymore. And the reason for that is there's a couple of different reasons, but the main one is because the cladding isn't sure what you want to do on the corners necessarily. It wants to make sure that you can do corner windows, for instance, fine, and that sort of thing. So when it reaches a certain point, it stops uh, following the geometry of the actual wall, and it just leaves a cutout at that section there. In a lot of cases, this is what you will want, especially if you are doing corner windows, corner doors, that sort of thing. But you may not want to do it. You may have a window that just meets up very close to the edge, the edge or the corner of your walls. And so this isn't what you want. So if you do have that happening, just select your wall covering, go to the configuration tab here, and we've got the option to ignore it near the ends. And at the moment, it's ignoring anything under 200 mil from the ends. So what we're going to do is we'll say that we actually don't want you to ignore anything at all. We'll hit OK there, and that will override that setting. So we'll just say, hey, I'll just do exactly what I'm told. And if you do happen to get into a corner, then I will keep doing exactly what I'm doing. So if you do have the scenario where you know that you need to be able to do this and you're not too concerned about your having to deal with corner windows or anything like that, you can just leave this always set to 0 in your default settings if you like. Otherwise, you can just turn it on as needed when you have something a good distance away from the ends. It is a good idea to have it set to something most of the time, just because it does make the edges of the wall a bit more complicated than they need to be necessarily. So it helps the tool be able to handle those a little bit better in certain weird cases where you have a lot of walls intersecting at the same point. It gets a little hard to tell what edge is what sometimes. And so if you run into weird scenarios there, this setting, if it's set to 0, can be causing the problem there. So if you have chosen to use 0 and you do have something weird happening in a multi-intersection corner, then it's a good idea to set that back to 200 or something like that to handle that sort of thing. All right, I've gone over time a little bit, but I'll just quickly see if we've got any questions before I finish up. All right. All right, it looks like we don't have any questions today. As I say, if you do think of any other questions about the wall covering tool or just about any of the CI tools in general, you can email those through to nz.support@centralinnovation.com. That will either be answered by one of our very helpful support team, or they will forward it on to me and I can help you out as well. I'm also helpful sometimes as well. So send it through to us and we will help you out. And if you do have a suggestion for a future webinar topic, please let me know just by emailing that same address because I am running out of things to do. Although, as you may know, we have a relatively major new thing happening pretty soon. So yeah, so we'll be covering that probably, maybe if not in next week's session, in the one after. That's all from me for now, though. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for your time, and I hope to catch you at the next one. See you.